I'm especially excited to hear Dr. Ariely because I'm at NC State to study economics. Dr. Ariely is a professor of behavioral economics at Duke University down the road. He studies how people actually act instead of how they should act. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Ariely.
Thank you. So, it's nice to be here. I have lots of connections to NC State. My father-in-law is still teaching here for a few more months. He's been teaching here for, I guess, more than 40 years. My wife went here. My brother-in-law went here. My mother-in-law. So, lots of NC State connections. What I want to talk today about is the problem of self-control. And to kind of get us started thinking about the problem of self-control, I want to tell you one of my kind of personal experiences. So as you can see, I was badly injured a long time ago, and I was in hospital for a long time. And one of the things I got while in hospital was a liver disease. There were two sisters in North Carolina called the Delaney sisters. On the day when the youngest of them reached 100, they had an interview with them in the New York Times, and they said, "What's your secret for longevity? How did you last so long?" And they said, "We have two secrets. The first one is that we decided never to get married because we don't want the husband to drive us to an early grave. And the second is that we decided to try and avoid hospitals because hospitals are places you go to get more sick." Well, in my case, I got slightly better, but I also got slightly worse, and I contracted this liver disease. It was bad enough to be in the burn department. It was a little bit worse to get a liver disease that kind of delayed my treatment and rejected some of my transplants. So overall, not a great experience. But one of the things was that you just didn't know what was the problem. They didn't know what was the particular liver disease I had. And about 7 years later, I was in grad school already. I had another inflammation of my liver problem. I checked myself into hospital, and they told me I had hepatitis C. By that time, they could identify the virus. So this was good news. I knew what I had. Plus, there was an experimental trial for the FDA going on, trying to see whether interferon, a medication that was originally approved for hairy cell leukemia, was going to do well for hepatitis C. They asked me if I want to go on this medication, and I said, of course, yes, because I knew that dying from liver cirrhosis is not a good way to go. So I started taking these medications. And these medications basically symbolizes kind of the conundrum and difficulty of modern day, which is the following. I had these injections that I was supposed to inject myself 3 times a week for a year and a half. And if I did it regularly for a long time, there was a chance that I will not get liver cirrhosis 30 years later. But at the same time, every injection meant that I would be sick for the next 15, 16 hours. Headache, vomiting, shaking, nothing compared to dying from liver cirrhosis, but unpleasant, certain, and now. So just think about it. Imagine you were standing there with an injection, you had to inject yourself, and you knew that the next 16 hours will be miserable. Would you make this trade-off in this way? And somebody changed something about my slides. And it turns out this is not a new problem. This, you can think of it as the Adam and Eve problem. Right? You can say, who in their right mind would ever trade eternity in the Garden of Eden for an apple? Right? It seems like a strange trade-off, but the fact is we all do it all the time. Here's the modern version of this question. Who among us will ever do this? It turns out many people do, and it's not because we take the cost and benefit into account. It's not that we say, how much do we enjoy living? How much do we not want to die? How much do we not want to kill other people? How important is this text message right now? And let's weigh the cost and benefit and decide if this is the right thing. No. Instead, there's something called the present bias focus. We focus on the immediate outcome, on the immediate reward, and basically neglect the future consequences. Another version of this. Think about it in a more general term. Imagine I asked you, what would you rather have? A half a box of chocolate right now, or a full box of chocolate in a week? Half now, or full in a week? And imagine that I passed it around. So you could see the chocolate, you could smell it, and it was good Lindt chocolate. How many of you here would wait another week for another half a box of chocolate? 1, maybe 15, 20%. And I assure you, if we actually pass it around, there'll be fewer of you that will, that will say that. But most people say, give me the chocolate now. Now, imagine that instead of looking at now, I said, let's delay the choice to the future. And I say, what would you rather have? A half a box of chocolate in a year, or a full box of chocolate in a year and a week? Half in a year, full box of chocolate in a year and a week. Now realize it's the same decision. It's the question of whether it's worthwhile for you to wait another week for another half a box of chocolate. But guess what? It feels very differently now, right? Because how many people now would wait an extra week in a year for another half a box of chocolate? Everybody, right? Because in the future we are wonderful people. Right? Right now we have lots of problems with self-control. How many of you, for example, have eaten more in the last month than you've hoped you would? Exercised less than you thought you would? Saved less than you hoped you would? Had more unprotected sex than you thought you would? No, not that problem. Okay, so but the rest of it, all of those problems are problems of intertemporal choice. It's between now and later, and it turns out that when we face this trade-off between now and later, we often get it wrong. We often over-focus on the present, neglect the future, and do things at the end of the day come to hurt us. So, anyway, I took these medications for my liver problems. And when I went back to get my liver biopsy a year and a half later, they told me that, first of all, I was cured. There was no trace of the disease, which was good news. And subsequently, interferon was actually approved for treating hepatitis C. But the second thing they told me that I was the only patient in this protocol who took the medication on time. I think the question is how? Do I have more self-control than other people? Do I care more about my future? Am I somehow more thoughtful? And the answer, of course, is neither of them. None of them. The answer is that I developed a little trick for myself. And my trick is that I love movies. If I had time, I would watch lots and lots of movies. So what did I do? On every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, which were injection days, I would go to the video store on the way to school. I would pick a few videos that I really wanted to watch, and I would carry them in my backpack the whole day, anticipating watching them. Then I would get home, I would inject myself, I would get a bucket and a blanket for the side effect, and I would start watching a video immediately. I didn't wait for the side effects to settle in. I started watching the videos directly after the medication. And this procedure, together with the fact that I don't have very good memory, so I could watch the same movies over and over, sustained me through this very long period. Now let's think about this. You would say that, what is important in life? Livers are really important. Much more important than injections, and much more important than movies. But this is not how we as human beings look at stuff. It's not just importance, we also have the time dimension. And when the time dimension happens as well, the livers are are kind of in the future and vastly discounted. So what happened is that the liver is not looking as important. Instead, it is vastly discounted. And we don't look at it. It's kind of far in the future and not that significant. The injections, because they are now, look really important and really now. And the trick that I invented, if you think about it, did I start caring more about my liver? No. I did what we call is reward substitution. I substituted caring for the liver for caring for movies. And the movies are not that important, but because they were now and immediate, all of a sudden that made me care much more about them and act accordingly. So I want us to think about other things in which we could try and apply reward substitution. So let's think about global warming. Can people be energized to deal with global warming? Hard to imagine. In fact, if you went backward and you said, let's create a problem that people would not care about, you would most likely come up with global warming as the kind of perfect storm of human apathy. Long term in the future would happen to other people first. We don't see it progressing. We don't see anybody suffering. And anything we could do is a drop in the bucket. You take all of these elements separately, they cause apathy. Together, we have ultimate apathy. Can we get people to care? Maybe a few people from time to time, unlikely to be galvanizing people. So what can we do? Can we try to think about reward substitution? Can we try and think about ways in which we would get people to act as if they care about global warming for other reasons? And one solution, or one way to think about it, is I think the Toyota Prius. And my non-scientific observation is that people who drive Toyota Priuses smile more than other people. And I think they do it for a good reason. They go ahead, they drive their Toyota Priuses, and they say, look at me, I'm a wonderful person. And not only am I a wonderful person, other people can recognize it because this car looks so different. They realize what a wonderful person I am. Can somebody get the same joy from changing the air conditioning system in their homes, on the water heater? Of course not. But by linking people's energy consumption with something that also gives them some utility to their ego, they can boost about it for themselves and to others, not in a bad way, in a nice way, all of a sudden we create a situation in which we have reward substitution, people doing the right thing, perhaps for the wrong reason. We're trying to do similar things with water savings. There's lots of ways to think about it. So I told you one thing about one approach to overcome self-control problem, which is reward substitution, just getting people to care about stuff that is now. If we have a very hard time caring about the real thing in the future, maybe we could substitute with caring about something now, something different, and acting based on that. The second approach I want to talk about is what is called self-control contracts. And this is a slightly different story, and this goes back to the story of Ulysses and the sirens. So if you remember, Ulysses knew that if the sirens will come, he will be tempted. So what did he do? He tied himself to the mast, and he asked his sailors to put donag in their ears. This way he could still listen to the song of the sirens, but he was not tempted to follow them. And everything worked out. Now, what does this say? This say that we know that the situation will come when we will be tempted, and we are going to do something to eliminate ourselves from being tempted, to eliminate ourselves from being able to follow on this temptation. This is equivalent of you going to a restaurant and giving $1 to the waiter and say, don't show me the dessert tray. You know that if the dessert tray will come close to you with a hot chocolate souffle, the chances that you will take it is very high. But for trying to kind of circumvent it, you're paying somebody money, tying yourself to the mast to prevent that from happening. So before we think about how this works for people, let's think about animals for a minute. So imagine you're a rat or a pigeon, you can choose. And I tell you that the green button, every time you see a green button and you press on it, you get 1 pellet of food immediately. And if you see a purple button, it takes you 10 seconds and then you get 10 pellets of food. Now, what happened, you think, when we give them both to the animal? And just realize that for them, 10 seconds is like a week for us. You give them green or purple, what do you think they choose? Very sad, they choose the green. They go for the immediate reward, like all of us most of the time, and they forgo a higher reward. It gets even worse. If the trial starts, and the purple button comes, and they press the purple button, and then a couple of seconds pass as well, and then the green button comes. And if they can just hold off and not press anything, they'll get the 10 pellets, but they can't. They press the green button, and they forgo the 10 pellets of food. But here's kind of the optimistic thing. Imagine the trial starts, the purple button appears, and then a red button appears. And the red button does nothing positive. There's no reward, there's no food. And pigeons don't like pressing buttons just for the fun of it. But the red button eliminates the appearance of the green button. Would the rats and the pigeons have enough foresight to do that? Would they act to eliminate future temptations? What do you think? Would they do it? Hard to imagine, but they do it. Not all the time, but from time to time they do it, and they basically get higher rewards. And I think that's actually very optimistic. First of all, because if they can do it, maybe we can do it too. But the second thing is that it's all about the red button. If you say, let's present the rats and the pigeons with this natural environment that has temptation, they're helpless. As are we when we are going to restaurants and have lots of temptation in life. But if you create this red button, if you create these instances that basically allow us to eliminate temptation from our future self, life can be better. So another way to think about it is that for all of us, it's hard to think about our own Ulysses solutions. But if somebody proposes it and gives us an easy way to tie ourselves to the mast, we might do it. Here's a couple of examples. This was a clock that one of the students in the Media Lab came up with. It's called Clocky. And it's a clock with two big wheels that when they move in slightly different speeds. Now imagine that you go to sleep. And in your mind, when you go to sleep, you're the kind of person that wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go for a run. So you set up your alarm clock according to your view of your future self. And then 6 o'clock comes and you are no longer that person. Right? If you're a student, you're the kind of student who presses the buzzer and drag yourself out of bed at the last few minutes just before class starts or maybe a little bit after class starts. Now what does Clocky do? Clocky basically makes it unable for you to be that future self. Because the moment the alarm starts running, it also starts running in the room. And it's unpredictable, so you never know where you have to pick it up. Right? So you might have to crawl under some furniture or find it under the bed. By the time you finish that, you're awake. So you basically force your future self to behave in according with your recommendations. Another approach was this one, takes it even further. It's called snooze and lose. And it's an alarm clock that is connected to your bank account. And to a charity you hate. Now what happens? Every second that passes between the time the alarm comes up and you turn it off, money goes to a charity you hate. Now just think about it. Imagine the charity you hate most of all, and imagine trying to sleep while knowing that you're contributing to that charity. Now this is, you need to have kind of the Ulysses contract. Right? If you give it to a charity you love, it doesn't work. You might be able to snooze and at the same time feel you're doing something good for the world. You really have to get this extra step. I lost track of time, by the way. Okay. Stick is a website that was designed by originally two very chubby economists. And these two economists said, temptation is just too much for us. We can't do anything about it. We need to put some real stakes in the ground to make sure we don't overeat. So they bet each other half the yearly stipend. But if they don't lose weight, the other person will take lots and lots of money for them. If you're a PhD student and you lose half your yearly stipend, you lose weight, right? I mean, you don't have money to eat. But they said they put a really big bet. And it's important that you bet against somebody who will take your money. Because if you bet half of your yearly stipend against your mother and you lose, your mother says, oh, you don't have to pay me, it's okay, pay me later when you grow up and you have some more money. You want it to have some teeth. So you want to bet against somebody who actually take away your money, and they actually both lost lots of money. Ian, one of the people who they lost, but they also lost lots of weight. Ian, who started this, has this little diet plan called the $500 a week diet. He said, well, what's the problem with people dieting? Promise yourself, sign a contract that every week you're above your desired weight, $500 goes to a charity you hate, or a charity or somebody else. Right? And if 500 is not enough, make it 1,000. At some point it will be big enough. The problem is that when we have delayed incentives, we behave very badly. How do we make the incentives about now? This website, by the way, is also kind of an interesting. It basically, you install a software on your computer that tells other people when you watch pornography. And that's, again, supposed to act as a control mechanism. It also tells these people when you uninstall the software. So what is the point of all this? The point is that we all have Adam and Eve-like problems. Life is full of them, and if you think about the forces of commercial world, the forces of the commercial world are really to create stresses on our immediate self. There's no company out there that wants us to delay gratification for 10 years or 15 years or 30 years. They all want our money and our action right now. So the whole notion of capitalistic society basically said everybody is fighting for your money right now to get you to be the most tempted possible. And you know what? They're very, very successful. So we had some tremendous temptations all the time. And it would be nice if we could all come up with our Ulysses solutions. If we could all be as clever as Ulysses and come up with our own versions. We're not. But the good news is that there are things we can do about it. In some level, behavioral economics is very depressing. It says people are myopic and confused, they don't know what they want, emotional, impulsive. The good news is that as long as we create these red buttons, whether they are in software or in hardware, we might be able to overcome our natural tendencies and actually do better. And thank you very much.